The Chicago Bears definitely face an uphill battle against the Minnesota Vikings this week, but the divisional opponent isn't quite as good as their 3-1 record might suggest.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is so much fun and easy to play. No competing with other players, just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. Head on over to PrizePicks.com to get that 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. On the show today, we're going to preview this Bears-Vikings matchup. It is crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, but it's not going to be a regular crossover Thursday for us. Normally, we would be joined by Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. He is still overseas. He was at the Vikings game in London last week and is still in a different continent, and so the timing doesn't work out very well for the podcast. So instead of Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, we'll be joined by Arif Hasan, who you've heard on this podcast before, talk about the Minnesota Vikings. He's also part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast series of shows as well. He knows these Vikings and the NFL very, very well. We're going to talk about whether or not this Vikings offense is for real, whether we trust Kirk Cousins, how much of the Justin Jefferson ups and downs have been Cousins related versus what defenses have been able to and been unable to do against him. We'll talk about the struggles that this Vikings defense has had, some of the red zone struggles offensively, where they've struggled to get some of these drives finishing in the end zone, and we'll ultimately get a better sense of where the Vikings' strengths and weaknesses lie heading into this matchup. We always have a lot of fun talking to Arif, a lot of laughs, trying not to take everything so seriously and just be able to sit back and enjoy it because we have a good chemistry. It's a lot of fun, and let's jump right in. We're joined now by Arif Hasan, friend of the show. He used to cover the Minnesota Vikings exclusively for The Athletic, but now he is a national NFL analyst for Pro Football Network. But he still is a participant here in the Locked On Sports Minnesota show as well. So he's got his Vikings roots in there, absolutely. And he's here to help us preview this Bears-Vikings matchup this week. And Arif, I have to start. How did the Vikings almost lose to Andy Dalton in London?
You're familiar with the Vikings' ability against backup quarterbacks. I mean, you've seen what power they brought to bear against Chase Daniel, and actually the Bears version of Andy Dalton, which I guess they did win that game, but it was not as easy as it should have been. And they lost to Cooper Rush. It's bad, man. I don't it must be like they super need preparation or something because they're like pretty good against Aaron Rodgers, right? And you'd think,
yeah,
but yeah, so that's part of it. But also, I mean, like the team is just like not good. I don't know, like it's not bad, right? It's not the Bears, but it's not good.
So you're saying the Bears should start Trevor Siemian in this one, and maybe
100%, right?
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, but like I know when we talked to you before the season, right? We'd had you on to talk about Armon Watson, Amir Smith, Marset, and we got into a few Vikings things at that time. And one of the things you mentioned then was like this sort of like bigger picture concern that in the post Mike Zimmer era in Minnesota, how good would this defense be? Was that coaching staff able to mask some of the deficiencies and kind of hold together that core for so long? Now, 4 weeks into the season, what's your level of confidence in that Vikings defense? What are we seeing so far?
It's a no, I guess. There was an optimistic projection and a pessimistic projection, if I recall correctly, about kind of how the Vikings defense would progress without Mike Zimmer. And, it turns out that when you lose one of the best defensive coordinators that the NFL has seen over the past, 10 years or so, the defense gets worse. That's just what happens. They aren't as bad when it comes to run defense, but they're still a bad run defending team. So there's a very marginal improvement there. Pass coverage is a big concern. I think both in part because the players that they need to play the system that they want to play aren't there. They're not in the building. They don't exist yet. They're currently playing in the NCAA, which is a big problem for the Vikings who play in the NFL. But they're learning, right? And so the thing is, the Vikings have a fairly good pass rush, one that is being mitigated by the fact that quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball quickly, because the secondary is just not able to hold up in coverage to enable that pass rush to do anything. So the actual coverage capability once they're targeted is fine to okay, but there are miscommunications. There's sometimes, they just get burned. There is just a lack of complexity in the back end in terms of the assignments that they're willing to give these cornerbacks. And so they just don't have the ability to account for basic coverage beaters because they can't install rule systems that allow them to deal with, those kinds of coverage beaters. Right. And so, because against a cover 3, if you run 4 verts, right, like that's the normal, as an example, that's a cover 3 beater. And one kind of rule system that you can put in place is that, if you've got a nickel corner, you have that person just carry somebody up the seam. If you've got the number 2 or number 3 receiver and they go vertical, right? And they probably have that rule system in place, but more complex rule systems that deal with more types of coverage beaters just don't exist because the team either doesn't believe that the system has been sufficiently installed or they don't trust the players to be able to execute those rules. So not a very good passing defense.
So I guess how does that come together then? Because the Vikings they're 3-1. I think the based on the way we've talked about it so far, it's like, oh, this defense must not be very good, and like they're not. Certainly, no one's pretending that they're great, but like the last 3 games they give up like 24, 25 points. Like it's not terrible. Like they're still, and I know the week 1 win against the Packers kind of skews the points per game allowed number, but like they're not terrible. How have they been able to hold it together? What's been working here?
Very weird because you talk to any Vikings fan and it feels like they give up twice as many points. And the reason is because they aren't really giving up points in the second half. And normally you would say, hey, they're adjusting mid-game. That's really good stuff, right? They didn't give up any second half points against the Eagles, who were like one of the top offenses in the league. They didn't give up any second half points, I believe, to the Lions, who inexplicably are the top offense in the league,
Yeah.
right? And you think, wow, they must be doing a lot in terms of like their halftime adjustments, which, like, first of all, that's kind of just an overblown thing in sports in general. These halftime, like, you've got 12 minutes at halftime. You don't have time to make a ton of adjustments, right? But also, I think I characterized it on the Locked On Minnesota podcast, or sorry, the Minnesota Football Party podcast, Locked On Minnesota Sports, right? We've got like 8 podcasts there now. As less them tightening up and more them not effing up, right? It is really kind of how it's going. Fewer miscommunications are occurring in the second half. The ability to kind of adapt does exist. They are changing what they do, but also teams are changing what they do given the fact that they have a lead. Like if you've got, a 20-point lead entering the second half, you're just going to run the ball more. And the Vikings know that. So they're going to, play a lot less cover 2, right? And so that's mostly it, right? And they got a little bit lucky here and there. Missed kicks, blocked kicks are a part of the reason for that. That's not going to replicate itself. Tipped picks, not going to replicate itself. Genuine turnovers, that's nice, right? Special teams turnovers, right? That's not a defensive thing. That's, Chris Boyd causing a fumble on a punt return. That you don't get to give the defense that, right? So it's like stuff like that. It's just like kind of incidental. Like the special teams are some of the best in the NFL right now, which I never thought I'd ever say about the Vikings. But like that's part of it, right? It's that all of these small things are adding up to make that defense look a little bit. But in terms of like yards per play given up, they're still like, I don't know. You probably have the stats in front of me. I don't, but they're still pretty bad.
Yeah, yards per play is 26th.
Yeah, see, Like, which not an amazing statistic, I'll grant you that, right? But like an EPA per play, a much more analytics friendly statistic, it's also bad. It's just like these fluky turnovers and stuff like that are really driving a lot of the second half stuff that I don't think is going to continue to replicate itself. Not that I don't think Justin Fields won't be able to generate some turnovers. Like I think some opportunities are going to be there.
Oh, sure. Sure. Do you ever wish that before every NFL game, you could get up-to-date and accurate information before placing your bets or locking in your fantasy lineup? Well, now you can with the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion, not only for the NFL, but also the NBA and the MLB. Whether you're part of a fantasy tournament, placing bets, or just a huge sports fan or stats nerd, Elias Game Plan has everything you need. It's from the official sports statistic experts at the Elias Sports Bureau. They're the official statisticians of all the major U.S. pro sports leagues. You hear it on ESPN, you hear it on your local radio broadcasts, on television, and now you can have all of the stats and facts in your hand in the same way that everyone else does. Elias has everything you possibly need, and I love all the different stats you can pull with our friends at Elias. So take this NFL season to the next level and download the Elias Game Plan app today. Choose from 3 game plans when you subscribe, weekly, monthly, or annual. But I can get you 25% off your first month when you choose the monthly subscription. Just use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL25. Find Elias Game Plan Sports Betting in the App Store or Play Store today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL25. We're talking to Arif Hasan from Pro Football Network. He's a national NFL analyst for them. He's also part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota crew, the Minnesota Football Party, breaking down the Minnesota Vikings. Real quick, before we move on to the Vikings offense, I wanted to circle back. You mentioned the pass rush for them has been pass rushing fairly well. Is a lot of that just, Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter on the edges? I mean, like, I look at the matchup with the Bears and, like, yes, they've got weaknesses across their offensive line, but I think the number one concern right now is the interior at center and left guard. And we've seen like some from Dalvin Tomlinson, but how would you sort of rate where that pass rush is coming from and where the success has been?
Yeah, I think numerically you'd say it's Darius Smith. In fact, you wouldn't even say that Danielle Hunter is playing much of a role at all. But in terms of you like watch them, you just put down the spreadsheet, you nerd, and you watch the film, right? No, I mean, but it's fairly evident kind of what's happening with Danielle Hunter is that he's exploding off the line. Tackles are oversetting. That oversetting is creating space between the guard and the tackle that sets up somebody like Dalvin Tomlinson, right? Or he's drawing a double team between the tackle and the guard, and that shifts the protection assignments against Darius Smith a one-on-one, right? And so his win rate and his numbers aren't phenomenal, but he is enabling through stunts, twists, other types of pressure conversions, the other members of the team to generate some level of pass rush. And I'm saying the pass rush is good, but it's also not creating a high pressure rate on opposing quarterbacks. I believe the pressure rate is well within the bottom half. It's in the 20s somewhere, right, on opposing quarterbacks. Again, quarterbacks control pressure rate, by their ability to get rid of the ball. I believe the win rate's not that fantastic if you kind of try to control for that, but just generally speaking, they've been doing a pretty good job being fairly consistent about beating the opponent in front of them and forcing quarterbacks to make some level of adjustment. And so that to me is kind of what's happening. And we're just kind of losing out on the opportunities that it creates with that coverage. Zadarius Smith individually is playing very well. In fact, I believe by raw numbers, he's drawing, quote unquote, more double teams, right, than Danielle Hunter. But a lot of that is chip and go type stuff, right? Whereas Danielle Hunter is seeing some dedicated stuff, especially in the Saints game. Seeing some more dedicated stuff in terms of what's being applied to him. And he's just creating one-on-one matchups in ways that you expect, high-level rushers to do. So, Dalvin Tomlinson's been kind of exciting. A lot of that is just effort plays more than it is immediate pressure. But we saw a bunch of really good stuff in the Green Bay game about his ability to generate immediate pressure as well. And he has expanded his pass rushing set of moves in ways that I hadn't anticipated. He's playing with a little bit more quickness than I'm used to seeing. So he's turning into somewhat of a pass rushing threat. I would not, consider him like Fletcher Cox or anything, but it's there, right? And against, a weak interior, he's going to be able to make some moves.
Yeah, the Bears center Sam Mustipher gave up 7 pressures last week, mostly to Dexter Lawrence. So there's you only got to be Fletcher Cox to get some pressure up the middle there. We're likely going to see Justin Fields do a bit of scrambling again in this one, and the Vikings saw that with Jalen Hurts at times in that Eagles game. I'm curious your thoughts, like with a rushing quarterback. I mean, Dalton wasn't really doing it much to them, and Rodgers wasn't much, but like, how do you sort of feel about what they did against Hurts? How much of that is like, the Eagles offense certainly has a lot more ways to threaten you than the Bears offense will. And how much of that was just, them with, like you mentioned, communication things, being able to pick up on when a quarterback is leaving the pocket and keep him there or spy him or whatever it might be.
Yeah. They didn't spy Hurts all that much. They did a little bit in the first half and then they abandoned it. So I guess they are making some adjustments, right? They didn't blitz at all in the first half. They blitzed 5 whole times in the second half. So
wow. That's a lot for Ed Donatel. I mean, wow.
Yeah, it really is. The blitzes worked, by the way. They were phenomenal. It just kind of leaves you wondering what's going on here. He was like 1 for 5 against the blitz against the Vikings. Like, hey, man, think about this for a second. But
I'm done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that they'll probably anticipate treating it very similarly. Mostly because if they had a second crack at Jalen Hurts, they would play that one a little bit differently. But they would probably play Justin Fields somewhat similarly, right? Because he holds onto the ball for quite a bit of time. That's going to give, regardless of, I think, how good the opposing secondary is. And that's going to create some opportunities for the pass rush. And so there's probably not a huge reason to send a blitz unless they think that him speeding up his process is catastrophic. Which might be the case. I haven't studied him so closely that I know how he does when he has to speed up his clock. But I think that primarily they're going to leave the blitz a little bit alone, even though that's kind of the response du jour against running quarterbacks these days. And they're going to try and make sure that those receiving opportunities just aren't going to be there for him. And then they're going to let kind of the 4-man front. They did imply this week that they might blitz more often because they're not getting pressure and they're not blitzing. And, it just feels like, one conclusion leads to the other, right? Yeah. But I don't know if they seem deathly terrified of blitzing running quarterbacks when it feels like the rest of the league is moving in the other direction. Lamar Jackson's making people pay for that, but that's just because of who he is. For the most part, that seems to be working. I don't know, but I think that they want to make sure that they remain in kind of their classic zone coverages, which is what they did against the Eagles, that they always had eyes on the quarterback. I think that they want to very spot, zone, not like even match zone stuff. Right. And I think that they want to force the Bears to get their receivers to actually win some routes. Right. Which, against Devonta Smith and AJ Brown was not like the best gamble on the planet to make. Right. But, the Bears don't exactly have AJ Brown or Devonta Smith. So, a little bit of a better opportunity there.
So, last week we saw Aaron Rodgers throw a pick 6 and almost lose to Bailey Zappi. It's fairly well covered how Justin Fields' production has been low this season. So, does that leave Kirk Cousins as the best quarterback in the NFC North right now, or are you a big Jared Goff believer? Because I don't like any of those answers.
I did not anticipate this question.
Just right?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. The Jared Goff argument is that he's leading the most explosive offense in the NFL, right? If you cut out all the context for kind of how such a thing would occur, right?
Is getting a lot of work there. I mean,
right, yeah, he touches the ball in every play for an offense that. Yeah. Let's take a look at PFF grades at quarterback. This is going to be really interesting. So Aaron Rodgers is ahead of Kirk Cousins by not as much as you would normally anticipate, 77.1 to 72.9. So there is that. But by yards per attempt, let's see what we got here. I am scrolling down a lot, man.
Yeah, I just mean in terms of the consistency, maybe not the most dynamic, but we've seen Rodgers have a couple of tough games and some tough halves out there. And like, not that he's, done for, but it's just with their offense trying to learn the rookie receivers and stuff. And
Here first,
Kirk Cousins has Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and he's kind of a little more of a well-oiled machine. Like, it's not so much.
It feels like there's more to the Kirk Cousins offense right now than the Aaron Rodgers offense. I'll say that. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is playing better. It feels like he's playing poorly because of the ceiling that we expect him to hit.
Sure.
But the offense has a lot more richness to it, and if the Vikings score more through the air going forward, no one would be all that shocked given what we've seen over the first 4 weeks of the season. Um, I think that it's not the case that Aaron Rodgers is secretly playing at an elite level and everybody around him is letting him down, right? They are letting him down, right? But it's not like he's playing at such a high level and then suddenly, we're getting this. It's the case to me that Aaron Rodgers is playing like a reasonable, like a decent quarterback being made worse by the receiving core that he's dealing with. And it's very difficult to kind of parse this given what we know the history of Rodgers. Whereas Cousins is kind of underdoing it, right, with his supporting cast. And we know that he's got the capability to really I shouldn't say bring out the talent level so much as rise to the talent level of the supporting cast he has around him.
So Cousins over Goff, though?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not a Goff believer at this stage.
I'm not, but hey, good for him, man. He's doing a lot given all of it right now. I just congrats, dude. I'm happy for you.
And certainly I'm of the mindset that by week 18, Rodgers will be fairly clearly settled in on the same page with the receivers and very clearly far and away, but carrying his offense a little bit farther than what we've kind of back to those more standard numbers of Aaron Rodgers, a standard level of production from him. But with Cousins and the Vikings, I know a lot of it has been just struggles in the red zone and finishing drives with touchdowns. What's been the problem there? Why haven't they been able to score on the end of those?
I mean, part of it's variance, right? Like red zone scoring percentage is one of the most volatile statistics in the NFL, especially midway through the season. So that's part of it. But you break down some of the individual stuff, and I think it's just that Cousins is still attempting to marry this style of offense with what he's reading on the field. And it's not really working right now. Plus, he seems to want to actually be a little bit more of the improvisational quarterback that everyone demands that he is. And it turns out if you don't exercise that muscle, you're pretty bad at it for a while, right? He's done some stuff from an improvisational standpoint that I'm just wow, holy crap. I've never seen this before. This is fantastic. But more often it's just man, I don't what is the thought process here? I am so confused, right? There's a lot more of that than there is of the I've never seen this before. I'm happy. Right. But, I think primarily the issue is the way that the read progression works in this offense is just fundamentally different, even though it's the same bones, right? They're all West Coast zone play action heavy offenses, even though the Vikings have not been doing that much play action. But the read progression is just fundamentally different. And he is doggedly attempting to stick to it. And it is very difficult at the moment. And nowhere is that more evident than when passing windows are tighter, like in the red zone, right? And so he is missing open receivers. He missed an open Justin Jefferson twice, which makes up for the fact that against the Eagles, he threw to a triple covered Justin Jefferson a number of times in the red zone, leading to, a 7 pass deflection performance from Darius Slay. So he missed an open Adam Thielen and a KJ Osborne against the Eagles, and now he's thrown to Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne, missing open Justin Jefferson, right? And so he's just kind of missing what the defenses are trying to do. He's missing who's open, and he's missing his opportunities. And then there are some instances where it's just well, okay, he hit Justin Jefferson in the hands and Jefferson dropped it. That's just part of why red zone variance is the thing. So yeah, the Vikings are not scoring in the red zone. I figure that that's probably going to correct itself like most teams that if you make trips to the red zone, you're good. You'll be fine. You'll end up scoring more points, even if initially your red zone conversion percentage is not that great.
These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn makes it super easy to create a free job post. I mean, you probably have a LinkedIn profile. I've always had a LinkedIn profile. You can add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They've got simple tools like screening questions that make it really easy to focus on the candidates you want with just the right skills and experience so you can prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the quality candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I know a lot of the story over Kirk Cousins' career in Minnesota has revolved around what kind of quality of offensive line he's getting in front of him. And it seems like, it's been a slowly long-term sort of rebuilding operation there. Seems like, you got a guy like Darisaw holding down one side, and I think O'Neill's been pretty solid on the other, but interior still strikes me as a group that's, in progress at best. But like, he hasn't been sacked a ton, and the pressure rate is not out of control. I guess, I don't know, where's your confidence level in that group up front?
I think you nailed it. Right? Yeah,
Okay,
it's like, hey, man, this is kind of mediocre. That's great news.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
Is it better than before, even if that better is not great?
Yeah, no, and that's like kind of all like since 2010, right? Vikings fans have been just demanding mediocrity from the offensive line, right? They're like, look, we understand that like getting that 2009 offensive line with like Hutchinson and McKinney and Lodeholt and all that, we understand that that is a near impossibility at this point. Can you not be embarrassing? is like the standard, and they are meeting that challenge.
I hear that every day of my life.
But less often since you've grown out the beard, right?
Yeah,
I feel like
100%.
yeah. But yeah, it's not an embarrassing offensive line. Brian O'Neill is not playing up to his usual standard, but he's playing at a very high level nevertheless. Christian Darisaw is playing very well right now, which is nice to see. He's making a couple of mistakes here or there, which, he hasn't even started 16 games yet, right? So, that's not like a huge concern, but he's playing at a fairly reasonable level. Ezra Cleveland is okay. That's pretty cool to have at left guard. Okay. Garrett Bradbury is playing a lot better than he usually does. He's still like not good, but he's playing a lot better than he usually does. He usually plays like the 34th ranked center in a league with 32 centers is the issue, right? And so playing a lot better is still significantly below average, but he's like, it's getting dangerously close to the Vikings thinking about giving him like a 1-year minimum deal. And I'm concerned that's
big.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like, you just be careful. Don't do that. But Ed Ingram, the rookie that they drafted, I think with like 66th overall, something like that. Maybe 59th. It's 59th overall. They had the 66th pick and they traded up. 59th overall. He's playing like garbage. So that's a big problem. He's given up like 3 times as many pressures as anybody else on that line. So cool that you took a risk on a guy that was ranked like 100th on the consensus board and has the most disturbing history of a draft prospect. And he's not even like good. We'll see. I mean, he's a rookie, right? So like he could become good at literally any moment. I've just seen offensive linemen just turn it on. And especially, year 2, year 3 down the road when you expect these picks to pan out. But right now, that offensive line has an okay guard, a significantly below average center that is still beating expectations, and kind of a disaster of a right guard. And the tackles are fine. There's an opportunity for those tackles to be really high level. I don't know if elite's the right word, but really high level. And they're not there yet, but you could see it. And at any moment, if they turn in those types of performances, no one would be shocked.
So the Vikings are, I think, about a touchdown favorite at home right now. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly not expecting any sort of major upset from the Bears in this one. But if the Vikings were to lose this game, what do you think it would look like? Like what would it take? What has to go wrong for them or has to go right for the Bears in order for this one to be a Vikings loss?
Yeah, Khalil Herbert 200 yards, right? That
Well, of that at least. But the problem is 200 yards from Khalil Herbert means 50 passing yards from Justin Fields. So is that still a win, you know?
I mean, okay, in what world is Justin Fields getting 200 passing yards and everyone is comfortable?
Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like that's a world with like 3 picks and 50 attempts. That's my issue.
one of these weeks they're going to open it up and he's going to sling it, but he's going to need some better offensive line play. He's going to need some better receiver play, and he's going to need to trust the pocket, like learn when he can and can't trust the pocket, and that's taking time.
I've been bagging on Field, but has he even started 16 games yet? I don't think he has.
I don't think so.
He's about to. He's getting close to 16. Which I keep saying 16. I guess the mark is now 17. But you know
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think so. I believe if I were to isolate the Bears' strengths on a unit by unit basis, right? I think I can only say running back, right? Like I like Roquan Smith, but like I don't know if I'd say linebacker was a unit strength, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know if cornerback is a unit. Like I like Kyler Gordon. I don't know if cornerback's a unit strength.
Kyler Gordon has been rough to start.
Yeah, okay.
And Jalen Johnson is hurt and might not play in this one. We'll see how the week goes.
Cool. And Jaquan Brisker has a potential, right? But like he's missing his angles. So
he's getting there. There's flashes of it. He's been better than Kyler Gordon, but they both have had their rookie moments for sure.
Yeah. So there's not like a strength, right? So yeah, it's Khalil Herbert runs for 200 yards. That's how the Vikings lose.
But what happens to the Vikings? Like what is it Kirk Cousins getting a lot of pressure up the middle and disrupting that? Is it shutting down Dalvin Cook? Because it doesn't seem realistic that the Bears are going to shut down Justin Jefferson. It would just need to be like
two other teams have done it.
Well, but I was going to ask, like, was that just Kirk Cousins not seeing Justin Jefferson, or was that Justin really legitimately being taken out of the game?
Oh, Justin was legitimately taken out of the game against the Eagles. He was double and triple teamed.
Oh, it's double triple team. Okay.
Yeah, and same with the Lions. Although Lions fans will tell you, actually, Jeff Okudah just held on to like 1-on-1, and it's like that's like a nice fantasy, man. That's definitely not what happened. Okudah played extremely. I don't want to like take that away, but like that's not what happened. But yeah, I mean it was double teams against the Lions, double and triple teams against the Eagles, occasional triple teams, I guess, with the Lions, kind of depending on how you count it. When like Justin Jefferson really loves those over routes, or the Vikings love over routes with him, right? And so the Lions would always set their safeties to be quarters opposite whatever side Jefferson was on, so they could have their or set their coverage as quarters opposite. So like they do cover 6 a lot, right? So the cover 2 safety is bracketing Jefferson. And then you've got the corner playing the man coverage stuff that the Lions love to play. And then they've got the inside safety and quarters coverage ready to just nail that crosser, right? So if you want to call that a triple team, I think that, sure.
Yeah.
You've got 3 people with eyes on Jefferson. So in that sense, so that is how Justin Jefferson was shut down. Kirk Cousins against the Lions eventually was like, oh, like Adam Thielen is like wide open. He's not bad at receiver. Let me see what happens here. Right. so that eventually got figured out. But yeah, I mean, I could see the Bears. Okay, so Darius Slay and Jeff Okudah are better than
than Bears cornerback and Elder Scrolls NPC Kindle Vildor. Like, yeah. real name and not a made up player.
Yeah. So it would surprise me if Justin Jefferson was shut down, but it did happen several times, and it required like actually a team effort, and the Bears could commit themselves to that. I don't know, man. Like I think KJ Osborne is a better receiver than any of the Bears cornerbacks are, like corners, right? And so you shut down Justin Jefferson. Maybe Kirk has one of his games where he hyper focuses on Jefferson, in which case that would be kind of one of the paths to win, especially if there is a bunch of pressure up the middle. He was doing a bunch of YOLO stuff against the Eagles because of the pressure that was coming up against the middle. A lot of that was occurring on blitzes, so we'll see. So that would be kind of the way that you'd shut down the Vikings offensively. Now, Dalvin Cook in the running game has just not been doing very well, so the Bears can probably just do a reasonable job shutting that down. And then defensively, the Vikings, like I said, the Bears receivers are not like, the A team, right? They're not, the world's police force. They're not going to do a bunch of stuff, but the Vikings corners are just not coordinated right now. And so the way that they would lose is they give up some significant chunk plays, probably on a miscommunication somewhere. Maybe you let the AARP member Velus Jones do some stuff. Deep. Well, he still runs like a 4.31 at 60, right? That's like really impressive.
He hasn't played an offensive snap yet, and we're not sure if he will this week.
Okay, Amir Smith Marset. Well, he hasn't played an offensive snap either.
Yes,
right?
yes. No, he's
two. Okay,
he's a few. He's a target, actually. Thank you.
He's a target.
Yes,
good for him, man.
Revenge game. Armand Watts 3 sacks. Amir Smith Marset 100 yards, 2 touchdowns.
All in the cards, man.
Yeah,
all in the cards. But yeah, I mean, somebody goes off against a Vikings quarterback that misses an assignment, and like I said, Khalil Herbert runs for like 200 yards against a run defense that has just not been up to snuff. So that's how it would happen. But it's really hard for me to like -7 feels too favorable to the Bears to me, right? Like I mean, I understand that like it takes a lot of money to move off of a touchdown. And so I understand why it's stuck at -7 and not -8.5 or something. But like, this feels like a multiple touchdown game for the Vikings.
I will say the Bears have been in all 4 games late in the fourth quarter. They have
like a monsoon game.
Well, and even against Green Bay, they got stuck on. They failed on 4th and goal from the 1 on a quarterback power. That if they score that game, it's a 1 possession game in the fourth quarter. Like not that
if they score, they're only down by 7. That's
them right back in the game. They got an interception. I mean, like they're in the game. I'm not saying that. They within a 1 possession game late against Green Bay was there. I get it. But they haven't been blown out at any point this season. Like they've been able to. They're a second half team that's
resilient. Man. They stuck with it against the Giants. That's really impressive.
They chose to punt at their own
Giants
field against a team that didn't have a quarterback on 4th and 2. So they got in their own way a little bit in that one.
Yeah, I failed to give credit for the Bears against the Giants. That's a really good point.
Well, we should be in for what I'm anticipating will be a lot of field goals, with one team really red zone and one team really struggling offensively in general. So hopefully we'll see a lot of great kicker action out there. Arif, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. Let everybody know where they can find your work and what you've been working on lately.
Yeah, sure. You can find me over at profootballnetwork.com. I have an author page, so /author/A Hasan. I do like a weekly column. This week's column was like how weird it is how many 500 teams there are, or teams that are within a tie of 500. It's the most in the past decade. I talk about that for a little bit, what that kind of means for the NFL. But yeah, I don't know. I just like write about whatever I feel like now. This rules. I love this job. This is way better than covering a team. I'm sorry, Lorin.
Especially covering the Vikings with the ups and downs and the weirdness of that team. I mean,
the highs and lows of high school football. I mean, my next column is going to be like, how long will it take for me to call a Jalen Hurts elite? It took me about 4 games to call Josh Allen. We're about there with Hurts. That's going to be my next piece. It's going to be up soon. And then I also do like a weekly column after action report where I talk about the games that I watched that are fun and, what trends are emerging in the NFL as a result of it. So, check that out. And my most recent Vikings game story had very little actually to do with the football game that I went all the way to London to watch. It was a ton of fun to write. I highly recommend it. It involves 1,200 years of history.
Wow. Well, that's a teaser if I've ever heard one. Arif, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks again to Arif Hasan from Pro Football Network and the Locked On Minnesota Sports podcasts for joining us on our show today. If you enjoyed the conversation, if you laughed at all, if you had some fun with it and learned a thing or two about the Minnesota Vikings, make sure you hit that subscribe button on wherever you're listening to Locked On Bears, or if you're following along on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, click that little bell to be notified of all our episodes. That way you're going to be keeping up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Come on back tomorrow. We'll be putting together a game plan for how the Minnesota Vikings can fall to the Chicago Bears, what the Bears need to do to beat that. We'll take what we learned from Arif, and then we'll apply what we know about the Bears and put together a set of tasks, a set of opportunities for the Bears to maximize some of their own strengths and attack some of the Vikings' weaknesses along the way. So come on back for that. We'll break the game down on Monday's podcast as well, and keep coming back for more opportunities to bear down.